In the time since X7, Maverick rebellions have only increased. Humans, you remember those things, right? Well, they got sick and tired of Reploids massacring them, so they finally went, F it, let's go live on the moon. The human migration to the moon was called the Jacob Project, and part of it included building this very, very, very long elevator. Imagine having to climb that thing if the power went out.
What a thrill.
Pretty early on, we get to hear X's new voice, and I gotta say, big improvement over X7. In the English version, X is voiced by Mark Gatha, and Zero is voiced by Lucas Gilbertson. Like I mentioned in my Maverick Hunter video, these two are perfect as X and Zero, and it's sad that it took Capcom so long to find these guys. Mark and Lucas are who I always imagined X and Zero to sound like. Not long after the orbital elevator is introduced, there's a vehicle accident on it. X goes to investigate when he's confronted by something quite disturbing. Look at all those Sigmas, said some teenager on TikTok probably. But surprise, they aren't Sigmas at all, they're all just 4th generation Reploids that all have Axel's copy ability. Apparently that technology that was so important and unique in Axel has now been incorporated and become the norm in the new series of Reploids. Another Reploid appears and explains that the new generation Reploids are immune to viruses, so much so that they could transform into Sigma without issues. None of this really makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, if I dressed up like Wolverine for Halloween, I wouldn't suddenly have an adamantium skeleton or a love of cigars. The Reploid explaining all of this is Lumine, director of the Jacob Project, and who will clearly be the villain of the story, or at least that was my first impression. Then again, I was also pretty confident that Cygnus was up to something too, so who knows. The game then suddenly pivots into the intro stage, an inconsequential mission for X and Axel to play through that explains the basic functions of the game, but doesn't really have anything to do with the main story. It's a pretty sloppy transition. I mean, there's a car accident, X goes to investigate, then the head of the Jacob Project introduces himself in the most unnecessarily menacing way possible. No one puts out the fire or helps whoever was injured in the crash, and then the scene just ends. It's very weird, but back to the intro stage. Between the intro stage being called Noah's Park, the whole Jacob's Ladder thing, and humanity trying to ascend to a higher plane of existence, X8 really seems to be using a lot of biblical allegories to set up themes about its story, and, well, we'll see if any of it pays off. Hey, real quick, if you haven't watched my Rise of Mega Man X retrospective, go watch that. It covers X 1 through 4, along with the Extreme games and Maverick Hunter X. It's the perfect prequel to this epic tale that you're watching right now. Also, I have a Patreon, so if you'd like to see some bonus goodies for my channel and help support me, go to patreon.com/wesdoesgames. And lastly, I've made some cool merch for these Mega Man videos. The X shirt and Zero shirt are available now to purchase. They are cool, I'm really proud of how they turned out. Buy now at wesdoesgames.shop. Thank you. There's a lot you could tell has changed since the last game. For starters, the art style in X8 is notably different. The character designs are slimmed down and simplified. It looks like they're slowly evolving into Mega Man Zero's art style, which, honestly, I think it's a great touch for continuity. Here's Mega Man from X8 and Copy X from Mega Man Zero for reference. Other characters are redesigned altogether, like Aaliyah suddenly has big heaving breasts now. Here's what she looked like in the previous game. And I'm by no means against Reploids enhancing themselves, but really, this design change is pretty much just Capcom's rising tide of horniness finally coming for the X series. But we'll cover that more in the Mega Man X Dive video. Would the X series have been cancelled if Aaliyah had gone big old knockers earlier? Who could say? But no, we'd be playing X18 right now, and the world would be a better place for it. Conversely, Zero got completely boned with his art change. They turned his big, beautiful hair into a skinny little angel hair pasta noodle. Look how they massacred my boy. Another notable difference in the intro stage is how the characters move. Gone are the days of slow, rainy turtleoid movement. Capcom decided to go the opposite direction and have everyone run and jump around like the game is set at 2 times speed. It still doesn't feel right, especially the jumping. The player jumps like they're gravity's bitch, no floatiness at all. Enemies now drop these cute little crystal shards for you to collect. I can't explain why, but the way they scatter pleases me. Axel's shooting is majorly improved, he can now hover in the air and fire, and overall just feels much better to play as this time. The game also introduces the idea of enemies grabbing you, forcing you to swap characters. I like that they gave an actual practical reason for swapping characters now, versus the last game where it was just there because why not? As opposed to X7, where the stages and enemies didn't seem like they were really designed around one particular playstyle, certain challenges feel like they require certain characters. Optic Sunflower's stage, in particular, seems like it was designed around Axel's moveset, and you're gonna have a hard time if you didn't add him to your team. In Avalanche Yeti's stage, Zero has an objectively better weapon than X. Gravity Antonion's stage benefits greatly from Axel's hover ability as well, etc., etc. Another new feature is the double attack, which allows both team members to do a synchronized move once the meter is charged up. It's a nice enough addition, but it's absolutely game-breaking. Using it on Maverick bosses will pretty much kill them right away, and it doesn't take much to charge the gauge. Still, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, and it doesn't hurt to include it. Overall, the intro stage is pretty good and effectively teaches the player about all the new gameplay mechanics in a streamlined manner. My only complaint is that sometimes it'll pit you in a room against hordes of weak enemies and won't let you progress till they're all dead. It just feels like filler content. Like this room full of bees.
What's this? A handsome family picnic woefully underpopulated by bees? A large influx of bees ought to put a stop to that.
At the end of the stage, who should make his sudden and glorious reappearance other than Vile? Vile hasn't been seen since X3, and even then he was a hidden boss. This time, though, he's pretty important to the story, as he's kidnapped Lumine and taken control of the orbital elevator. Seems like the sort of thing Vile would do. I gotta say, I love his new art style here. With the green armor, they pretty much discard the whole purple Boba Fett thing and went all in on just being Boba Fett.
It begins now, X. A new world will be born.
Well, I guess Vile's gonna be the main antagonist. You're thrown right into the stage select without really any explanation for why you're fighting these particular 8 Mavericks. The previous games had given us some context for why those particular Mavericks were important to the plot, but this time around we just have to assume they're working with Vile because the game doesn't elaborate at all. Aelia won't be your only navigator aiding you during the missions this time. Joining her are Lair and Palette. Aw, that's adorable. They did a small, medium, large thing to mirror Axel, X, and Zero. Lair's design is just baffling to me. I mentioned earlier how Aelia got the Pamela Anderson treatment, and that's great, but Lair really just takes me out of the game a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's fan service, clearly, but why would a Reploid have boobs? Like, what would be their function? In the Zero and Legend series, the line between human and Reploid gets even more blurry as technology and civilization advances, so maybe there's a story justification for robo-boobs? I don't know. Hit me up in the comments if you want me to do a 2-hour retrospective on this topic, because I have nothing better to do. Honestly, there's not much to say about these girls, personality-wise. They are exactly what you'd expect from their design. To make an Azumanga Daioh comparison, because why not, they're all anime tropes anyways, Palette is Chiyo, Aaliyah is Kiyomi, and Lair is Kaki. For the non-nerds, these girls are the Chipettes to our boys' Chipmunks. Besides filling out the X-Hunter team a bit more, these navigators actually each have their own skill. After selecting your team, you could choose one navigator to help you out as well. Palette will chime in during gameplay to give you advice about the stage itself, and if hidden items might be nearby. Lair will give you battle strategies about the Maverick boss, and Aelia will give you kinda general middle-of-the-road advice. X8 has a lot of strengths, but I don't think its bosses are one of them. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that the bosses in X8 are the most bland and forgettable in the whole series. Yeah, that's right, even X7 had more interesting Mavericks. And don't misinterpret that, that's not a pro for X7, it's a con for X8. The Mavericks in X7 weren't good either.
Burn to the ground! Burn!
Bamboo Pandemonium is a giant panda bear, and there's something about his design that's really off-putting and creepy to me. Every stage in X8 has a gimmick, but Bamboo's stage is probably the closest you'll get to regular platforming. There's right armor you're expected to use for the majority of the time, but just like in the original X games, the stage is designed to accommodate not using it as well, which is nice. You could even bring the right armor into battle against Pandemonium, which was previously only possible with Magma Dragoon and that baby kangaroo from X7.
Destroy! Destroy! Destroy!
The boss conversations in X8 have the most inane and lazy writing yet, and I'm including X7. Each conversation could pretty much be summed up with X saying, "You're a maverick," then the boss saying, "What does it even mean to be a maverick?" and then X saying, "Shut up, you're a maverick," and then they fight.
Did you know that the earliest form of rocketry was missiles used for war?
I mean, it's not like these scenes were ever well written, and the voice acting is certainly better this time around, but it's just a shame to see a step down in quality here, when most of the other facets of the game have been a step in the right direction. One interesting thing, though, is that about halfway through the game, Sigma reveals himself to be behind Vile's plot. Big surprise. And after that point, all the Maverick bosses have alternate dialogue. Optic Sunflower was in charge of a virtual Maverick Hunter training facility. Sunflower went Maverick and has programmed the facility to attack the player. You'll have to go through a series of challenges in order to proceed. Most of these challenges involve shooting this little servbot-looking enemy that appears quite a lot in the game. A cool Easter egg the developers added to this level is that if you have a save file for Mega Man X Command Mission on your PS2, you could fight Cutman in one of the challenge rooms. Dark Mantis. His level gimmick is all about sneaking through the base without tripping any alarms. I mentioned that the boss dialogue in the game is pretty abysmal, but some parts are a little interesting. And for perhaps the first time in the series, we're seeing Reploids choose to follow Sigma completely of their own free will. I think this idea is important as it leads into the Zero and Legends series, where Reploids become more and more like humans, faults and all. Gravity Antonian. I really don't know how this is supposed to be pronounced. It's spelled Ant Onion. Yeah, so he is just a big ol' ant, and as such, he's got more cake than layer. He's a scientist who studies anti-gravity, and I'm convinced this pun is the only reason they made him an ant. His stage consists of these gravity puzzles that flip the room around, dropping and moving blocks accordingly.
What is this?
A center for ants!
You have to think carefully about which way to flip the room so you don't fall into a trap or get smashed by the blocks. It's a pretty decent challenge, and I like it a lot. Earthrock Trilobite is the third bug-themed Maverick in this game. I actually had to look this one up. Apparently, a trilobite is an ancient marine arthropod that's been extinct for quite some time. And also, there are too many bugs! His stage is weird but interesting. You're in a mining facility and being chased by a giant robot that's gone haywire. Halfway through the level, you'll fight it, and then it reverses direction, and you'll have to chase after it the way it came. I find the stage to be a tremendous chore, but I gotta give it props for having a cool concept at least. Gigabolt Mana War. His stage is unique because it completely revolves around you chasing him through the city in a spaceship, not unlike a couple of Jedis chasing down a bounty hunter in Croissant. This level could go one of two ways. If you stay on him and attack quickly, the whole level could be done in 30 seconds. If you let him get too far ahead of you though, it's gonna drag on forever. Once I finally caught up with him, Gigabolt's voice sounds much different than I imagined.
I'm no maverick. I'm in complete control of myself and my actions.
He sounds like a slow child, and I definitely feel guilty fighting him. Still, his boss fight is pretty fun, and he's got a fair amount of unique moves I haven't seen in any other X game. Avalanche Yeti is exactly what he sounds like. I mean, I'm certainly not complaining. I love kicking Bigfoot's cousin's John Ratzenberger's sounding ass just as much as the next guy, but it just feels like we're losing the plot here a little. I mean, come on, Capcom. A Yeti, a Sunflower, when freaking Lion hasn't been done yet? Or a Scorpion? Or a Man? That's right, I said it. Yeti's stage is another vehicle level, but pretty different than the Mana War chase. This level plays out like the Jet Stingray stage from X4, but in 3D, and worse. The save points are way too spread out, so you'll spend about 5 minutes on monotonous, easy sections where all you do is move and shoot, and then suddenly they'll introduce a bunch of instant kill pitfalls, and once you've died, you've got to start from the very beginning. It's pretty tedious. Burn Rooster is the game's obligatory fire-themed Maverick. There always has to be one. His entire stage has you slowly descending into a smelting facility via multiple floating platforms. It's a cool concept. There's only one issue. The developers apparently forgot to put enemies in this level. Like, where is everyone? Burn Rooster's stage is interesting because it's the only Maverick boss in the series where the level continues after defeating him. The player needs to ascend the floating platforms and escape the way they came, which is weird because why can't they just teleport away like they do in every other instance? Strange design choice. Y'all forget how to teleport? Mega Man X8 introduces intermissions, which are cute little endurance tests where you have to fight a never-ending stream of enemies until you eventually die. You don't get penalized for dying though, and you could retry indefinitely. The enemies drop medals, so the intermissions are specifically designed for you to farm them. There's 4 different intermissions, and they unlock progressively as you get more and more game overs. So basically, this is the game's way of patting you on the head and going, "Aw, I'm sorry this game is a little too tough for you, buddy. Wanna go over to the corner and play with your color crayons?" As far as the music goes in X8, I can honestly say I don't remember a single track, and I played the game twice. I guess it's fine, just completely average. Here's some songs I did like. The upgrade system is revamped once again. If there's one consistent thing in the X series, it's that Capcom is never satisfied with their own upgrade or item collecting mechanics. The simplified linear chip system from X7 is scrapped, and now we're back to an overly complicated affair like in X6. You could use metal pieces, the main collectible, to buy items such as health or energy refills, or even extra retries. This is also how you'll level up X, Zero, and Axel. The special weapons for X are the Shining Ray, the Squeeze Bomb, the Shadow Runner, the Thunder Dancer, the Melt Creeper, the Drift Diamond, the Crystal Wall, and the Green Spinner. Axel gets his own unique weapons, sort of. His main attack will be replaced by a variant of these same special weapons. So, for example, Axel's version of the Shining Ray will turn his main attack into a laser beam. His version of the Green Spinner will make his main attack a grenade launcher, etc., etc. Zero has kind of the best combination here. He could change out his primary weapon, like in X7, but he also gets new techniques, like in all the games prior. One of his new moves, the Tenshohao, creates an energy tower that obliterates just about everything, and it's freaking awesome. I gotta say guys, it has never been a better time to play as Zero. Except for the hair, that's still unforgivable. After all the bosses are defeated, the player could access the final stages, which is just the orbital elevator itself. This level is pretty much what you would expect, a floating platform stage where you have to fend off waves of enemies as you ascend. Eventually, you'll get to the moon base where Vile is waiting. I'd hoped that Vile's role in the story would have some significance, but no, he's literally just there to be a foil, and the only reason he's helping Sigma is to bring chaos for chaos's sake. After defeating Vile, you'll proceed through the moon base and fight a bunch of copy Reploids that are all imitating Sigma. Not gonna lie, it startled me a little bit the first time I saw one. Fortunately, they're really weak. If they were anything like X2 Sigma, I would have pissed myself. When the party encounters Sigma, he has a few different lines depending on who the player is using, but it all boils down to him talking about the new generation Reploids and how they're like his children. After all, their copy ability is based on data from hundreds of past Reploids, including Sigma himself. It's his goal to lead his so-called children into space, destroy the world, and start a new one on the moon. I actually find this to be pretty interesting. In previous games, Sigma wanted to destroy the world for the sake of destroying it, but now his goals are a little more human, and it shows how far the Reploids have evolved since X1. After defeating Sigma for actually the last time, for real guys, this one really is it, Lumine appears and reveals himself to be the main bad guy, a plot twist I think we all saw coming from a mile away. Lumine explains, if it wasn't already established, that new generation Reploids have the power to go Maverick at will. They aren't infected with the virus, but they can copy the thoughts and bodies of previous Reploids who were infected. Thus, they could empathize with their Maverick views, but still, ultimately, they're making a conscious decision to align themselves with evil. Like mankind evolving and reaching towards a new life in space, the new generation of Reploids have now evolved to the point where they truly have free will, and that includes the free will to be evil. Still, X and the Maverick Hunters can't simply let Lumine destroy the world. After all, there's probably some humans on it still. Maybe, there's gotta be, right? The game references humans occasionally, but we haven't seen any actual humans since Dr. Kane. Maybe they're all underground, raving out in Zion. Lumine's boss fight is hard but predictable, using moves from the 8 Maverick bosses. He takes on an angelic form, as opposed to Sigma's demon form prior. You'd think there might be some significance to this, but considering they had the same ideals and goals, the whole demon and angel thing are really just kind of trite, meaningless symbols here. Our heroes defeat Lumine, and as he dies, he freezes into an unnecessarily creepy pose. I don't know if this was intentional, or if it was just made uncanny from PS2 graphics, but either way, it'll give me some nightmares tonight. Lumine gets one more pot shot at Axel, knocking him out but not killing him. This goes absolutely nowhere, and I cannot fathom why it was added. X and Zero ride the elevator back down to Earth. Zero gives X some encouraging words, like he always does, something to the effect of, "Hey, whatever happens, we have to keep fighting the good fight, right, X?" And then that's it. The game ends with the title Mega Man X8 and the subtitle Paradise Lost, as if that was the subtitle of the game the whole time when it wasn't. Like I mentioned earlier, the story heavily relies on comparing itself to John Milton's epic poem, and I could really only connect a few tenuous threads together. In the poem, Lucifer tricks Adam and Eve into eating the forbidden fruit, and afterwards, they're kicked out of paradise. The fruit itself is from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, I'm no biblical scholar, but there's plenty of people that interpret that story as a metaphor for the loss of innocence, and how once you see the world for what it is, you could no longer live in the paradise of blissful ignorance. Reploids are kind of like Adam and Eve before eating from the tree. They live only to be subservient to their creators. Once they go Maverick and start thinking for themselves, they're hunted down and destroyed. By X8, the new generation Reploids are taking their destinies into their own hands, choosing to burn down the tree and create their own paradise on a different world. That's about where the comparisons end, for me at least, and that honestly is a bit of a stretch. I think a lot of times Japanese storytellers like to use Western iconography and Christian symbols for flair, but rarely for substance. Like the creators of Neon Genesis Evangelion saying they used all those Christian symbols because, quote, they looked cool. In my opinion, this is probably as far as the Paradise Lost allegory goes in X8. So in summary, this story has about as much depth as a New York-style pizza. Forget about it. I'm walking here. There's a few secrets and unlockables in this game, so let's go over them. X gets 2 new armors. The Icarus armor focuses on power and jumping, and the Hermes armor focuses on speed and agility. And once again, X gets his ultimate armor, and Zero gets his black armor. This time, Axel gets his own unlockable, the white armor. The best secret in X8, though, is that the 3 navigators, Aelia, Layer, and Palette, can all be unlocked as playable characters. It just isn't easy. You have to play through the game once, and on a second playthrough, the option to unlock them will take the form of their weapon, which you will have to pay 40,000 medals for. To put that in perspective, I got about 40,000 medals after beating the majority of the game and not using any of the medals to upgrade anyone. So really, it almost took 2 playthroughs to do this. The specific operator that you unlock is going to be whomever you used the most in the previous playthrough. I could be wrong, but I think to unlock the other 2, you need to use them more often than the others, meaning that between that requirement and the high medal price, you'll have to play the game at least a few times in order to get all 3 navigators. The girls pretty much play the same as the guys, they're really just model swaps. Palette replaces Axel, Aelia replaces X, and Layer replaces Zero. It's a good time, it just takes way too long to unlock them. But hey, you could also get them using an input code on the title screen, so there's that. Apparently, these girls made history, as it was the first time Capcom added playable females in a mainline Mega Man game. Good job breaking the glass ceiling, girls. Too bad X8 was the last game in the series. This is like adding Paget Brewster to the last season of Community. This woman is a treasure, why are you wasting her on this last season nonsense? When the game released in 2004, it was met with mixed reviews. You'd think after X7 people would be stoked about a return to form, but instead, everyone was kinda just done with the series. Enthusiasm was clearly waning, and reviews and sales reflected that. I made it pretty clear in the previous video that I thought X7 was just absolutely horrible, so how does X8 hold up by comparison? I've heard a lot of people say that it's absolutely amazing, but it's certainly no X1 or X4. It's miles better than X7, and that huge whiplash in quality probably makes it seem even better than it is. To me, X8 took all the things that people hated about the previous games and removed or changed them, which is good. The clunky 3D gameplay was removed, but the 3D graphics were kept. The new character Axel came back, but this time he actually feels great to play as. But the thing is, it's not enough to just fix the mistakes. There's a palpable lack of heart in this game, both in the story and the overall execution of how everything plays out in X8. The game feels weirdly rushed. From the boss intros to the cutscenes, it feels like the game is trying to get you in and out as fast as possible. And I think the reason for that is that the game doesn't want you to spend too much time focusing on its weaknesses, like that the story sucks or that the Maverick bosses aren't very interesting. Don't get me wrong, X8 has a sort of charm to it, but it's a game that feels tired. Like, okay, we're doing this again, we're fighting Vile again, we're fighting Sigma again, but sadly, no amount of enhanced graphics or anime titties could save the franchise. It was too little, too late. But don't be too bummed out. While this was the end of the series proper, it wasn't the end of the Mega Man X expanded universe. It seems there's still some Mavericks left to hunt. Special thanks to David Saperstein, Zen, Kyr's Curse, Bosick, Chaz Bazenko, and Jilly Mays. You truly are Mega Men and Mega Woman. Thanks for being supporters of the channel, and if you want to be a supporter too, join my Patreon.